Time becomes unsettling the moment a person realizes it cannot be held, only lived and lost. Welcome to another story in the series From Wonder to Power, The Journey of Thought. Today I want to explore Augustine and how philosophy turns inward to confront the mysteries of time, memory, and evil within the human soul. The world Augustine inhabits is one of transition. Empires weaken, faith deepens, intellectual traditions shift from public debate to interior reflection. In this landscape, the search for truth moves away from the order of the city and toward the restless movement of consciousness itself. The question grows sharper in this new setting, you see. If reality unfolds within time, how can the soul grasp what is always passing? Augustine approaches this not as an abstract puzzle, but as an existential urgency. He senses that memory binds the past, attention struggles with the present, and expectation stretches toward the future. Yet none of these moments can be fixed. To understand time is to confront the instability of human experience. To understand evil is to face the distortions that arise when freedom turns away from what gives it meaning. This episode begins where philosophy ceases to map the cosmos and begins to examine the self. Wonder becomes introspection. Order becomes inner struggle. Power appears not as control over the world, but as mastery of orientation within it. After morning prayer ends, Augustine remains seated, his thoughts drifting rather than settling. Outside, the city already moves with its usual urgency, shaped by obligation and routine. Within him, time behaves differently. The past presses forward through memory. The future intrudes through expectation. The present feels too narrow to contain either. What unsettles him is not how time is measured, but how it is lived. He begins to see that time does not exist as an independent force moving through the world. The past no longer is. The future is not yet. The present disappears the moment it is named. Yet all three are undeniably experienced. The key, he realizes, lies within the soul itself. Time is not a thing outside. It is the stretching of consciousness. Memory holds what has been. Attention grasps what is. Expectation reaches toward what may come. The soul is drawn in three directions at once, and this tension is felt as duration. This insight reshapes how he understands restlessness. Anxiety grows from anticipation. Regret grows from recollection. Peace emerges only when attention rests fully in what is. When the soul clings too tightly to past or future, it fractures. Prayer becomes not escape from time, but a gathering within it. Turning inward allows the scattered self to recover unity, even as time continues its movement. Daily experience confirms this pattern. A hymn remembered too vividly pulls the mind backward. A sermon anticipated too eagerly pulls it forward. Only sustained attention makes the present inhabitable. Augustine realizes that human suffering arises not because time passes, but because the soul is divided by its passage. Eternity, by contrast, is not endless duration. It is undivided presence. Seen from above, this move shifts philosophy's center of gravity. The problem of time leaves cosmology, and enters consciousness. Duration becomes an interior phenomenon tied to memory and desire. Medieval thought will inherit this inward turn, treating the soul as the primary site where metaphysical questions are lived rather than resolved. As Augustine rises and returns to his duties, time resumes its familiar pressure. Yet it no longer appears as an external tyrant. It is recognized as the soul's own stretching, something to be understood rather than endured without reflection. Silence follows the reading. Yet Augustine does not close the book. His gaze turns inward, toward a space more vast than any library he has known. Memory opens before him, not as a simple storehouse of images, but as a depth without visible boundary. Faces long gone, words half forgotten, emotions without clear origin rise and fade. What unsettles him is not how much the soul remembers, but how much it holds without effort, you see. He begins to understand memory as more than a psychological function. It is the inner place where the soul encounters itself. Within it, past events remain present without being repeated, and meanings endure beyond the moments that first shaped them. Yet memory carries more than recollection. It holds truths never learned in time, and desires never fully explained by experience. When Augustine searches for God, he does not look only to arguments or signs. He looks inward, into this strange interior vastness where the soul exceeds its own limits. God is not found there as one object among others. Divine presence appears as the very condition that makes remembering possible. Truth is recognized when it is recalled, not invented. When Augustine grasps a moral certainty or a mathematical insight, he senses he is not creating it. He is recognizing something already present. Memory becomes the meeting place between the finite soul and eternal truth. This insight reshapes his understanding of conversion. Turning toward God is not acquiring new knowledge, but returning to what has always been nearer than the self. Forgetfulness becomes estrangement rather than mere distraction. Sin appears as misdirected attention, a turning away from the inner light that sustains knowing and willing. To remember rightly is already to begin healing. Seen from above, Augustine's move transforms theology. God is no longer sought primarily in the structure of the cosmos, but in the depth of interior life. Memory becomes a sacred space where eternity touches time without dissolving it. Knowledge and faith converge through recollection rather than assent. As Augustine closes the book and prepares to speak, nothing outward signals change. Yet inwardly, something decisive has been found. God is no longer distant. He is discovered where the soul remembers what it could never have learned on its own. Late in the day, as shadows stretch across the courtyard, Augustine listens to a dispute that has become familiar. Someone speaks of evil as if it were a force, an opposing power attacking the world from outside. The image is vivid, almost comforting. If evil has substance, then suffering has an enemy to blame. Yet Augustine senses that the explanation collapses under its own certainty. Well, he turns instead to his own memory. When he recalls cruelty, betrayal, or neglect, what stands out is not the presence of something added, but the absence of something withheld. Love that should have been there is missing. Order that should have guided action has weakened. Even hatred appears less like a creation and more like a distortion of desire. Evil does not build, it erodes. Gradually, his insight sharpens. Everything that exists, insofar as it exists, is good. Being itself is a gift. Evil cannot possess independent substance because it does not truly exist as a thing. It is a lack, a falling away from fullness. Just as darkness is not a rival force but the absence of light, evil is the privation of good. It depends on what it damages. It cannot stand alone. This understanding reframes responsibility. If evil were imposed from outside, the human will would remain a victim. But if evil is privation, then the will participates by turning away. Sin becomes misdirection rather than creation. The soul does not invent new realities. It chooses lesser goods over higher ones, fragmenting itself in the process. Augustine recognizes this descent within his own past. The consolation is quiet but decisive. Because evil has no substance, it cannot claim final authority. It cannot rival the good as an equal. Restoration remains possible because nothing essential has been destroyed. What is lacking can be restored. What has thinned can be strengthened. Redemption appears not as conquest, but as healing. Seen from above, this insight dissolves the metaphysical drama of dualism without denying suffering. Evil is real in its effects, yet dependent in its being. God remains the source of all that is, without becoming the author of corruption. As evening deepens, Augustine withdraws from the argument. The world still bears its wounds. Yet it is no longer divided between equal powers. It is understood as damaged good, still capable of being made whole. The noise of the city fades as Augustine steps away from the crowd and closes the door behind him. Public debate has exhausted him. Words spoken in the open begin to sound blunt, shaped more by defense than by truth. What he now seeks cannot be reached by louder arguments or sharper logic. It demands a different movement, not outward toward objects, but inward toward the one who judges them. He grows wary of the habit of grounding certainty in external things. Senses mislead, opinions shift, authorities contradict one another. Yet none of these confusions disturb the simple fact that he is the one who doubts, who evaluates, who searches. Interiorness becomes his method. By turning inward, he does not sink into subjectivity. He discovers a firmer ground. Even error presupposes a mind capable of recognizing it as error. Truth, therefore, is encountered not by roaming the world, but by attending to the light that makes knowing possible at all. This inward turn is not indulgence, it is discipline. Augustine examines thoughts as they arise, testing their direction and origin. Does an idea clarify or distract? Does it unify the soul or scatter it? In this scrutiny, self-knowledge and knowledge of God begin to converge. The more honestly he confronts his own instability, the more clearly he perceives what does not change. God is not found by escaping the self, but by passing through it without remaining trapped there. Interiorness reshapes moral life as well. Sin can hide behind public conformity, but not before inward attention. The soul cannot deceive itself for long when it listens carefully. Confession becomes both epistemic and ethical. To speak truthfully about oneself is already to step closer to truth itself. Knowing and willing become inseparable. Error persists where attention refuses to dwell. Seen from above, Augustine secures a decisive methodological shift. Philosophy and theology turn inward without becoming arbitrary. Interiorness becomes a path toward objectivity because it reveals the conditions under which anything can be known. The self is not the measure of truth, but the place where truth becomes visible. As Augustine returns to the world of duties and disputes, nothing outward signals the change, yet it shapes everything that follows. Knowledge will no longer be sought first in the stars or in books, but in the depth where the soul encounters itself before God. By the end of Augustine's reflection, truth no longer appears as something secured by external order or abstract system. It becomes something encountered within the restless depth of the soul itself. What he gains is a new center for philosophy. Time, memory, and evil are no longer treated as distant puzzles, but as lived realities shaping consciousness. Knowledge turns inward without losing its claim to universality. The search for God becomes inseparable from the search for self-understanding. Wonder no longer begins in the cosmos. It begins in interior experience. Order emerges as discipline of attention rather than structure of institutions. What is lost is the confidence that reality can be grasped fully through outward observation or public reasoning alone. The visible world becomes less authoritative. Certainty now requires introspection, patience, and humility. Philosophy grows more personal, but also more demanding. It must now account for the hidden movements of desire, memory, and will. You know, this moment marks a decisive shift in the journey from wonder to power. Thought withdraws from external mastery and discovers a subtler form of influence. Power becomes orientation within the self, not control over the world. The soul replaces the city as the primary theatre of philosophical struggle. In the next chapter, philosophy returns to the public sphere in a new cultural setting. Averroes reintroduces Aristotle through the intellectual life of the Islamic world, challenging how reason and revelation relate. There, the question of truth becomes political and theological once more. Can one reality sustain both philosophical reasoning and religious faith? Or must they diverge in their claims? If this series has sparked your interest and you wish to delve deeper into the topics discussed, I invite you to the source from which it originates. This book takes you on a journey from the 7 sages of antiquity through the modern revolution with Kant and Hegel to the contemporary philosophical dilemmas of the 20th and 21st centuries. In the book, you will find significantly more details than I could present in the film, as well as space for your own reflection at your own pace. It is this very book that forms the foundation of the entire series you are watching. If you wish to explore the history of philosophy in its full version, get it on Amazon. The link is in the description of this video.